Everyone, welcome. Today we're going to take a look at lesson 4, which is editing and combining shapes and paths. We're going to take a look at some new tools today. So working with the scissors tool to kind of cut things apart, a knife tool to cut into objects. We're going to take a look at something called outlining strokes, where we'll take an object and actually make it art instead of just a single line that we can edit a little bit easier. We'll look at eraser tools, compound paths, something called the shape builder and Pathfinder tools. So really just ways of taking existing art that we've worked with in the past lesson to create basic shapes and then kind of getting a little bit more detail, a little bit more kind of customization to them. If you're taking a look on Blackboard, you'll see everything is on the announcements page now as far as what the due dates are, where the links are to lesson files, all that stuff. And again, we're going to be starting here under weekly assignments, and then under lesson 4, here's our start file. So I'm going to click and download this. I already threw a copy of it on my desktop here. It's just called lesson 4 start.ai. And then some additional videos are down below for you if you do want to take a look at them for With Tool, Pathfinder tool, or Shape Builder tool. I'll cover all these in the demo, but these are going to be required for the follow-up extension project, and we'll come back to that after we're done with the demo. So I want to jump into Illustrator here. What I want to take a look at first is where the tools are located that we're going to be working with this week. So we're going to be using mostly things out of this menu here. So you may see like this little eraser, the scissors, or a little knife. Whatever one is open, remember you're just going to press and hold so that you can see all of them. And then we'll select whichever one we're going to be needed for that step. The other tools we're going to be working with this week is over here. You're going to see this thing. It's called the Width tool. We're going to play around with that a little bit. And then we also have this thing over here called the Shape Builder tool. And we're going to use that to kind of take a bunch of different objects and combine them into one big one. So what I want to do before I get started is zoom in on the work area. So I'm just going to grab my magnifying glass and pull in here. And what we're going to do is we're going to use these chunks to kind of build out something new to finish the piece along the right-hand side and try to assemble all 3 of these little dinosaur guys. So I'm going to start off first is this shape here. It's kind of like this triangle with a little bit of a curved base to it. What I want to do is I want to reshape this thing. I want to kind of add it and almost make it look like a kind of like a 5-sided object. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back over where my eraser tool is, and I'm going to select the scissors tool. Now remember, before you work on any of these things, you need to make sure that you have the object selected. You want to see it highlighted with the lines and points in between everything. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the scissors tool, and what this does is it acts just like you'd think a scissors would. If I click on this, it's essentially the same thing as like snipping across. So what it's going to do is just cut that, and if you can kind of imagine it as a string, it's just going to cut that in half, and now the string is in 2 pieces. So now what I can do is I can grab my direct selection tool, and then I can grab either one of these anchors, and I can kind of pull these things away and reposition them to pull them across or pull them apart from each other. So I'm going to take that snip. So again, all I did is with the scissors tool, I clicked once, and then with the direct select tool, I'm pulling these things away. Now you're going to see, because there's this big stroke here, that there's no yellow line connecting these two. This is actually an incomplete shape. We want to make sure that these 2 points are still connected. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my direct select tool, and I'm going to click and drag just over those 2 points. So you'll see that these are all hollow along the bottom and sides, but these 2 are active. And what I want to do is I want to join these 2 objects together. So with them selected, I can go to my object menu, path, and then join, or Command J is a shortcut for that. And what it does is it just joins those points. Now that it's joined, I don't need to see that big yellow line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this right here. And remember, we can get to this in a couple different ways. We can either have the object selected with our regular selection tool. We can grab it here. We can grab it from our colors panel. But what I want to do is I want to take this yellow line, and I'm going to set this to none. So again, I can do that from here as well. So now with this object selected, I've got these little points, and if I come back to my direct select tool, you see I kind of have these little circles here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click and pull these things down. Grab them 1 anchor at a time. I'm just going to use that to smooth these lines off a little bit, kind of put like a little bit of a curve onto that shape. So that's part 1. When I'm done, it's just 1 piece. I don't need to worry about grouping it or anything like that. It's all ready to go. Next thing we're going to take a look at is working with the knife tool. So again, underneath my scissors, that's where my knife is. And the knife kind of sounds like it would. So imagine if you imagine this is like a piece of dough and you're just going to cut a chunk out of it, that's basically what this is going to do. So I'm just going to click and drag, and it didn't do anything because I didn't have the object selected. So again, make sure you have your object selected first. You need to tell Illustrator what it is you're going to work with. Now when I do this, I can kind of drag it, and you'll see it kind of adds a little bit of curvature, and it just cuts that into separate pieces. So now if I click on this, it's a separate object from the other one. So what I want to do though is I just want to cut a little notch out of the top of this. So I'm going to click up here, and I'm going to draw like a U shape. And then what I want to do is with that U shape, now that I've cut this out as its own separate piece, I just want to darken this. I want to get a little bit darker shade of green here. So we take a look, there's one right to the right of the original color, just kind of darken that a little. Now, because I created an object where I'm slicing it apart, I do want to keep in mind that when I'm done, anytime I have pieces or the multiple chunks of something, I like to make sure I group it when I'm done. But what I want to do is I want to try something else. I want to kind of cut some additional shapes out of this and kind of apply almost like a shading effect. So again, I'm going to select this object now. I'm going to go into my knife tool. And then what I'm going to do is with the knife tool selected, if I just click and drag, it gives me kind of these just freehand drawn lines. I want to draw a straight line on this thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down the Option key. And when I do that, it gives me a nice straight line. Now, I can also hold my Shift key if I want to work in 45-degree increments, but I think that's good. So one more time, just going to click and kind of position. It might, maybe you want to start down here so you can see right where the center of that shape is. But I'm going to hold Option and drag up. If I hold my Shift key, it locks it into those 45-degree increments. I know I'm going exactly straight north. And then it snips that line. Same thing I'm going to do here is I'm just going to draw across from maybe about the midpoint here to right to the bottom and get a little bit more of a shape. So just like I did before, I'm going to hold my Option key to make sure I have a straight line. I'm going to come straight through that line and right down to that bottom point and clip that. And let's do a little bit more of a shading effect here. I'm going to take this new piece that I've just created by slicing with this knife tool. And I'm going to go to a slightly lighter shade. So let's go to like maybe this green one will look good. So now because I have all these as separate pieces, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all this stuff, just like we learned before. I'm going to right click and make this thing into a group so it all moves at once. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to kind of make like little kind of like horns for this thing around the outer edge. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the eraser tool to cut this out, but I kind of have a problem here. If I use the eraser tool and I'm doing this on an object where it's just a stroke, it wants to push the stroke in and I kind of get like a weird effect with this. So rather than doing that, what we're going to do is we're going to take this one stroke and we're going to convert this into, instead of a stroke, just a solid block. So what I'm going to do is with this object selected, I'm going to go to my object menu, go down to path, and then you'll see a command called outline stroke. What that'll do is it'll take that one big thick stroke that's maybe 30 points thick, and now I've got two lines. Now it just kind of connects it into one big chunk. It's not going to act like one big stroke anymore. It's going to act like kind of art. So what I'll do is with this eraser tool, now instead of it kind of reframing everything, it's just going to cut into things a little bit. Now, if I want to change the thickness or change the sizing of my eraser tool, I can double click on it. And here, if I want to change my angle, my roundness, my size, I set my size around 30 points. Thought it was good for kind of this bigger operation. I can cut around all these. And notice it does do a little bit of smoothing. I'm not worried about making it like completely perfect. I just want to kind of get it in the center. But I'm going to kind of drag like U shapes all the way around. These over here. If yours aren't perfect, don't worry about it. And if you do have a shape that you're kind of unhappy with, remember, you can always just undo it. Or if maybe like this one, I want to nudge out a little bit more, I can kind of go in and tailor that one off a little bit better. Now, I do want to get rid of all this shape on the bottom. So this will actually act like a regular eraser like you'd see in Photoshop or any other kind of basic paint program. And then it just clips that right out of there. So now I'm ending up with this shape. And notice my gray reference lines, that's just locked in the background. So we can kind of use that as a way to help. So now that I have that all clipped out, I erased off the bottom. Let's scroll over here and let's take a look at kind of the finished piece or where we're going to assemble this thing. I think this all looks good. I just want to make the bottom edge of this horn flatter. So same thing, just like we did before. I'm going to select the object and grab my erase tool. And I'm going to hold my Shift key and just kind of drag across. And remember, it's only going to erase the object that's selected. So now I have kind of that nice sharp line. So again, one more time, position it, kind of eyeball that, hold your Shift key and drag over, and that Shift key will make sure you have a nice straight line on it. So now that I have all this assembled, let me zoom out and let me put all this stuff together here. So what I want to do is take this piece, I'm going to slide it down here, kind of onto there, onto the little beak. That looks good. I'm going to grab this piece, and this is going to sit kind of in the background a little bit more, like right under the head where the horns kind of sit in. I think that looks pretty good. Once I get something in position, I can always use my arrow keys to nudge things up or down to kind of get them exactly where I want them. And then this last piece, I'm just going to set around kind of the outside edge, and there's my finished shape. So for this next one, we're going to take a look at is kind of a couple of other new techniques. We're going to take a look at creating compound paths, and then we're also going to work with something called the Shape Builder tool, which is really helpful. Let me zoom in first on the left-hand side here. What you're seeing here is basically three shapes, right? What we're going to try and do is make an eye out of this. So this is all pre-built art, these little lines and these little circles. That's going to kind of act like a glare, like the outside part of the eye. But what I want to do is I want to take this and I want to punch a hole out of the middle of it. So what I could do is I could try and color this the same as the background, but the problem is if I change this to a different background, that color needs to be changed again. What we're going to do is we're going to take this shape and we're going to punch it out of this one. That's something called creating a compound path. It's going to remember that object that got punched out of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop it right in the center. I'm going to select both of them by dragging over the top. And then I'm going to go up to my object menu, down to where it says compound path, and do make. What that does is that punches that hole right out of the middle. Now I can take this little kind of finished detail piece and just align this over and kind of snap it into position. And once I'm done with everything, I'm just going to make it into one big group so that it all acts, moves, and works together. Now, second part here, let me zoom out a little bit. This is where we're going to take a look at working with the Shape Builder tool. So the Shape Builder tool is going to allow you to take a bunch of different pieces and kind of combine them all into one. So what I've got is basically a couple different things. I've got this triangle here. I've got this kind of this like curved line, another curved line, a circle. So what I want to do is, it looks like this isn't actually a piece. It looks like it's just a guide point. So let's just go ahead and draw in with our polygon tool, a triangle. Remember, when you're drawing with your polygon tool, you're just going to click and drag and press up to add sides or down to subtract them. I'm going to go down to 3 sides here. I'm just going to draw that basic shape. And if I hold my shift key to lock it in, so I have a nice flat 90 degree. And then what I can do is position this on the center. I'll slide this down so the points match here. I'll slide it out a little bit in either direction. So now I've got all the pieces that I need. So now, because I've got all these pieces, what I want to do is I want to make a custom shape out of all these things. So the way I'm going to do that is by coming over here to the Shape Builder tool. Now what the Shape Builder tool is if I grab everything first and select it, with the Shape Builder tool selected, you see how it kind of hovers over areas and makes them gray? What I can do is I can click and drag areas together to combine them into one. So if I click here and then drag down, I got that little plus, it now creates a new shape. Now, that gave me kind of a new shape that I'm going to use for the nose. But what I want to do is I also want to subtract some shapes out of there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold my Option key, and you see how the little minus shows up just outside the icon. I'm going to hold my minus key, and I'm going to drag all these other pieces out. I'm going to drag across those lines. So when I'm done, this is the final shape I have. Now, once I have the shape finished, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to convert my color. I'm going to set it to this orange. I'm going to turn the stroke off. And now I've got the little beak part for the nose that I'm going to work with here. So now that that piece is done, I can take this, I'm going to snap it right above its teeth. And it looks like my alignment's not right. It looks like I need to arrange this thing or send it forwards or backwards. So remember, you can do that object bring forward, send backwards, or you can do command left bracket, right bracket. So I'm going to just left bracket until it's behind the nostrils and kind of little texture on the edge of the nose there. The other piece I want to do is this eyeball that I grabbed. Remember how I said because I punched out the hole, I don't have to keep changing the background of the circle? Well, here you're seeing that I can just punch this out. Now this is a transparent object through here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to position this thing right onto that eyeball. I think that looks pretty good. I'm going to zoom in a little bit just so I can really see kind of my alignment there. You go, nudge down just a bit. And I'm going to copy and paste this because there are 2 eyes. So I'm going to do Command C, Command V, or edit copy, edit paste. Now the only problem is my pupil is still sitting above the face. So again, just like before, I'm going to command left bracket this thing and arrange it until it's tucked back behind there. Same thing here. I like doing that command left bracket because then I can move left bracket, right bracket, forward or backward 1 step at a time. And there's my finished piece. Now for the last one we're going to take a look at is something a little bit different. We're going to use the same basic ideas, but what we're going to use is kind of a different tool for that. You can see that it looks like this guy's kind of missing an outline to his head, but it looks like all those pieces are together. And again, this is real simple. This is just basically 2 ovals and a circle that are going to make that shape up. And when you're working with simple shapes like that, if you just stack them on top of each other and combine them, then you're going to end up with a much more clean, kind of symmetrical looking shape. So let me zoom in on this a little bit. And I want to open up my Pathfinder tool. If you go to Window and then down to Pathfinder, that's where we'll select that. And you'll see that there's all these different ways of combining shapes when you have them stacked. Here I can just add them all together. Here I can subtract whatever's in the front, or I can intersect, so just the overlapping areas connect. I can exclude areas. I can divide things, trim them, merge them. So there's all these different ways that I can kind of take stacked shapes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all my shapes, and I'm going to use this one right here. I'm just going to merge these or unite them all into one big piece. So now it just gives me that one big shape. And now that that shape is all set, now I can do is just change my color. So now I've got this a nice bright green, and I'm going to get rid of this stroke. I'm going to set this down to none. And if I slide this over here, now my dinosaur actually looks like it's got a shape to it. Let's see on our reference. Let's drag this to about the edge of the eyes. We kind of want to fill out that corner shape right there. And I think that's probably pretty good. Now we have that, but what we want to do is we're going to add a little bit more detail, and this is kind of a fun way of working. This is something called the width tool and the shape tool, so we can kind of reshape and we can play around with a couple different things. Now we're going to start with the reshape tool. If you don't see a tool or you're missing something, remember you can always click on these three little dots, and as you hover, if you're looking for a specific icon, it'll show you and kind of light up where it is. You can see how many different tools there are in here, and you can also notice that it's kind of set up by categories, so like selections, drawing, typing, modifying. We're going to be modifying, and this is our reshape tool. So it's right there. And now that I'm done with this thing, I can just click this again to close that box. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, and this reshape tool is going to let me take an object. And first, let me select the object. It's going to let me take this thing, and if I click inside it, that straight line, it now kind of adds a curve to it. So now that I have that curve, I can kind of play around with my other options because now it essentially added a point. So now if I click on my anchor, now I can kind of reshape where it sits or how it looks. Now, next thing I want to take a look at is working with the width tool. And what the width tool does is it takes a single stroke or a single line and it adds a thickness to it. So what I want to do is I kind of make this thing almost look like a leaf. So if I hover over that line, you see there's a little plus point and a little circle. It's almost like a preview of where the point would go. I'm going to click right about in the middle and just drag out. You can see now it adds like a thickness to this. And if I grab my direct select tool, I can click on these individual anchor points. I can still edit them. So if I wanted to modify my curvature or anything like that, I can do it. But if I come back to my width tool, as I hover over here, it'll show when I hit a point, this little bar that comes out. So if I wanted to make it wider or smaller, I can still control that. Also notice it does it at the ends. So if I wanted to kind of these to come to like a real sharp point here, I can do that. And I can also adjust where this thing sits. So if I do want to make any changes to that, I can. So now that I have the shape built, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this thing, and it looks like it's probably a little bit big. So maybe what I want to do is I want to change the color, and then I want to put it in position. So let's do this. Let's select that stroke and set it to black. And I'm going to close my little preview box over here and drag this. And I want to kind of set these in. So I'm going to rotate them a little bit. And I'll hold my shift key so that I proportionally scale it down. And I'm going to position it right about there. And then I'm going to copy and paste because I want one on either side. And I'm going to go to my windows and then down to my properties. And inside my properties, I've got all the different properties for my objects. But here, if I wanted to flip this thing, I could flip it vertically. I could flip it horizontally. But then I can do that if I want to create an exact duplicate, flip it, and snap it right onto the side. So that's it as far as working with these. What you're going to end up doing is when you're done here, make sure you save this thing off as a PDF, save it and send it over to me. And then for the extension project for this week, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at creating 3 additional versions of your custom logo that you did last week by implementing some of these new tools. The Shaper tool, the Pathfinder tool, the Width tool. Maybe you're going to do some shading like I did by creating kind of some customized shapes with it, whether it was a lighter color or a darker color, kind of creating a little bit of depth. And remember, you can do that with any of these things. Like maybe you're going to use your knife tool or your scissors tool to cut a chunk out and apply a different color to it. So you're going to be applying all those techniques to your existing logos. So now you can kind of see, like when I started building that airplane, that this ring thing just started off as a basic shape, and I grabbed my width tool and started adding some points and some thicknesses to it and customizing the nose and the tail and creating kind of custom shapes like that. So that was really what it came to when I started building out all these other versions of mine. So again, you're going to take your 3 that you built last week, you're going to kind of further customize them, further expand on them using some of these new tools, and then you'll send that over to me as a PDF as well. So once you're done, make sure you save everything off as PDF, send it over as an email, and I'll see you guys next week for lesson 5.